Hi, it's Kim from the Shamrock Quilt Studio, and I'm back today with an update on our EPP project, Purple Pursuit. And I'm happy to report that all of the pieces have been constructed and assembled, and now they're in one piece. So before I show you this, I want to show you what we were left with. Because the part of the goal with this project was to make it with one jelly roll of the pattern fabric and then use as many on-hand supplies as we could and keeping our new purchases to a minimum. So we had the one jelly roll, which we got all this out of, and here's what was left. I had, thread is all tangled in, let's get rid of that. I had one full X that I did not use, and I had one piece that was constructed that I did not use. Then I had enough to make 1, 2, 3, 4 complete X's, and then some random pieces that I'm not sure there was enough to make the 4-piece unit. So very little scrap. I'll be able to use these either with some other project, an orphan block, a decorative piece to go on the wall. I could even use this for some type of EPP project, maybe for a little purse, a little small purse, or a little wallet. Any number of things, because these are just about 2 1/4 to 2 1/2 inches square, maybe a little bit on the rectangular side, and so that could be used for quite a number of purposes. But like I said, from what we started with, one jelly roll, to a finished product, this is all we had left over. So we used a good bit of that, and I'm very happy to report that. Now, as far as the white goes, we started with a piece that was probably a yard, probably 1.25 yards, I would think, from memory. It wasn't 2 yards, and I'm not quite sure it was 1.5 yards. We were able to get all of the little squares in here. Initially, my first thought was to run the white squares in on the edge, but I've decided to do something different, and as a result, I do have 3 width of fabric strips that I was going to make more of the white squares that we will not be using for that, and they had already been cut when I decided to make this change, and I'll tell you in just a minute how that impacts things. And so I had 3 or 4 of the little squares already constructed, and a couple of small pieces that I weren't quite big enough to make pieces out of. So while there's a little bit of waste here, again, these are strips of white fabric, and they could be used for so many purposes. We'll just put those aside as well. Now, back to our final project. As it stands right now, tip to tip, it measures about 24 by 43. And I'm going to be using this as a table scarf. If I had made it a little narrower, I could have used it for something like a dresser scarf, but it's a little wide for that. But what it fits perfectly as far as the shape and dimensions is for the middle of my dining room table. I like to put some decorative piece on my dining room table from time to time, and I always like something to sit under it. So that's what I'm going to finish mine as. Because of its size, you could also easily translate this into a baby quilt. Maybe change the dimensions just slightly, make it a little bit wider, and then put your borders on, and it would be great for a baby quilt. So there are a couple of ideas there. Now, as far as finishing it off, what am I going to do? Well, I said a moment ago that I decided not to put the white squares here. because what I'm going to do instead, and you could always put the white squares there and then just move forward, especially if you don't have quite enough material to make your strips wide enough, and like I've already cut mine, that might be to your advantage. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a white border, and if you'll give me just a second, no pins. There they are. Let me stick a couple of pins in this and I'll show you what this effect is going to be. I cut some strips that are 3 inches wide. No, I'm sorry, 3 3/8 inch wide. And that is a weird number because I had about 21 inches of fabric. And I was trying to get as many full strips as I could, as wide as I could from it. So what I came up with was I could get, I think it's 5 full strips of fabric, 3 3/8 inch. One more pin. And I'm going to show you this. Okay, so here we are. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a white border on this. And what that's going to do is it's really going to make those points and those little canyons, crevices, squares where there is no purple fabric really pop in this quilt. And it's going to show off that design probably as much as anything I could do. So that's going to be the next step. And I am going to sew these strips together, keeping my fingers crossed that I've got enough. I think I do. I was going to do mitered corners on both this and the purple. I think because of the restrictions I have in the white fabric, I'm just going to do a butted corner where one piece of fabric comes down and joins the other piece at a right angle. I'm not going to do the mitered corners on the white. I may do it on the purple. And then once I get that white border on, then I'm going to use the purple either as another border or as the binding. That I haven't quite decided because I want to put this on my table with the border and see what the sizes are. And depending on the size, then I'll make the choice. Do I want a border and then the binding, or do I just want the white border and then a small purple binding on it? That is a possibility. I'm not sure. I think I got 1.5 yards of this. It is 43 inches long. So I'd have to run the fabric lengthwise to be able to get it out of the, is that right? Yes, I'd have to run the fabric lengthwise to be able to get the backing out of the purple. So there'll be some decisions there about how I best want to use this 1.5 yards of fabric, whether it will be in another border or whether it will be in the backing. And that I'm really not going to know until I put this first border on. But I think that by looking at this, you would agree that making those points really stand out is going to be a benefit, and I want to do that. Now, the other thing that I'm going to share with you, something I don't normally do, but I am going to do in this case because I am not extending this border in 1/2 inch from the last fabric. So here in that little square cutout, the border fabric is only going to extend 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch back behind that. So what I think I'm going to do is run a machine standard straight stitch along the edge of this border at about 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch, just to give it a little bit of strength, so that when I hand applique this border on this hexy design, it will have a little bit of support there to hold that. And when you grab a hold of it out of the washing machine or you're ironing it, you're not going to pull it enough that it's going to want to fray there. If I had plenty of fabric, and this was a project where I was out buying fabric and could decide how much this would need, I would just have that seam allowance underneath the finished piece to be a little wider and not worry about it. But just to be sure, I'm going to do that. I think that'll let it hold up a little bit better. I could also do it by hand just for a little support, but it would be much faster just to do it on the machine. So I will join the strips together on the machine, and I will run that little stay stitch, is almost what it is, on the machine, and then go back to doing it by hand. What else did I want to share with you? What I will also be doing before I join the border to the purple piece is I will be pressing this really, really well. I mentioned on a previous video that for the most part, in some of the older sections of this, I have removed the papers from the middle of the design and only left the papers on the outside. So the outside's very straight and stretched against those papers, whereas the middle section has kind of contracted a little bit and is not holding its shape as nicely as the pieces on the outside. So the way to remedy that is to press it, probably add a little bit of starch in the middle temporarily while we work towards getting the borders on. That will help us also in getting them nice and straight and square. So the next step on this is to prepare the border and press and starch likely this purple piece, and then add the borders on by applique. So how I do that is I just use a little invisible stitch right along the edge of the purple fabrics onto the white to hold them in place. And then we will have the finished design and the white border, and then from there we will decide where the purple is going to go. Again, with this project, our goal was to use that purple honey bun jelly roll, honey bun. I don't know which one it was. That's a good question. I think it was a jelly roll. I think the honey bun is a little bit skinnier. I'll have to look that up to be sure. But we used that one unit of pre-collected fabric. And a funny thing is, I was in Joann's last week, and I happened to stop by the display they have all of these pre-cut sets in, and they had a jelly roll, that's what we'll call it. And I noticed that some of the fabrics, particularly this one, which is my favorite of all the fabrics in here, but this one and I think one of the polka dots, they have this same jelly roll just in a different color still. So if you really like this and you wanted to try this project, you might check your Joann's and see if they have, if not in purple, then in another color you could recreate the whole thing. So I think we've covered what we've done, what my next steps are going to be, and for you, what your next steps might be in your project. Next time, I hope to be able to have the borders on to show you, and then let you know what I'm going to do about thinking ahead to the binding, whether it's going to be a purple border or not. If it is going to be a purple border, we'll go ahead and get that put on, and then we're going to move forward with sandwiching this with the batting and the backing. Again, I hope to use either the purple fabric that we have. Where did it go? Here it is. The purple fabric that we have, or something white that I have in my stash to do the backing. And so then we will look at how to pin the pieces together to sandwich them, what my technique is. Sometimes that can be the most challenging part of a quilt, because you know you need to get it right. It is sometimes very large. At least with this project, we're pretty small. We can do it mostly on this table. We may have a little bit hanging off. So we'll set up to do that. and show you how I go about doing it and the tools that I use to do that with. So we've made a lot of progress on this. We are in the home stretch. We've got the top finished. We're moving on to batting and backing, and then to binding. Batting, backing, binding, the 3 B's. And we'll see you next time. Be sure to like this video. Subscribe to our channel because that's what helps us come back and show you more projects. It allows us to go out and buy new patterns and spend time designing things and working on things. Quilting takes a lot of time and sometimes it takes a lot of money. So your support is greatly appreciated. And we'll see you next time here at the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Thank you. Bye-bye.